Chapter 8 of Nicholas, a Manhattan Christmas Story by Carroll Moore. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Saint Nicholas comes. Nicholas opened his eyes, and there on the hearth stood a jolly old man, dressed all in fur, holding out a little fur coat and a scarlet cap.
"Quick, Nicholas, it's close upon midnight."
In a twinkling, Nicholas was inside the little coat, and drawing the scarlet cap down over his helmet, he sprang up the chimney after St. Nicholas and into the waiting sleigh. A word to the reindeer, and away they flew, high over the snowy roofs, above the fields and orchards of Old Chelsea. Far down North River they could see the lights of the ferry boats crossing back and forth to the Jersey shore, and tall ships rose in the moonlight beyond the bay.
"I came by the harbor way,"
said St. Nicholas.
"up over the Bowling Green and dear old Greenwich to Chelsea, and at midnight I always drive over the Bowery, where my good friend Peter Stuyvesant rests."
In another second they were above St. Mark's and Tompkins Square. Far down East River they could see the twinkling lights of Brooklyn Bridge and Long Island, a fairyland under the stars. The sleigh swerved in a zigzag, and another sharp turn sent them flying north again. Faster and faster they flew over Stuyvesant Square, over Irving Place, and Gramercy Park.
"There's Diana,"
called Nicholas.
"Merry Christmas, Diana,"
he shouted as they passed, and Diana, standing on tiptoe, watched them fly up over Madison Avenue. A little white marble palace shimmered in the moonlight as they looked down into a lovely garden sparkling with frost and snow. Then, higher than they were riding, just above the reindeer's horns, came a wonderful tower, and the next instant the reindeer's hooves struck the roof of a great marble palace, and down one of its chimneys sprang St. Nicholas with the boy from Holland. The fire had burned down to coals in the deep fireplace of a very beautiful room, and beside it, in a comfortable armchair, sat an old man fast asleep.
"I wake him up every year,"
whispered St. Nicholas.
"and this year I'm waking his children, for when I leave Harlem I drive out over the Hudson River and straight on past the Catskill Mountains. Watch closely as I go, Nicholas, and when you hear the sound of a trumpet, lead him over to the window before he sleeps again."
And laying his finger aside of his nose, St. Nicholas gave a nod and vanished up the chimney. The only light in the big room came from the moon streaming in through windows from which the soft blue velvet curtains had been drawn back. Yet Nicholas could see quite clearly the face of the old man sitting there, and it seemed to him one of the kindest and merriest he had ever looked upon. As the reindeer raced off over the roof above his head, the old man woke with a start.
"There goes old St. Nicholas, and I've missed him again. But bless my soul, who are you?"
he exclaimed.
"The old fellow leaves me something every year, but never a boy like you before. Who are you?"
"Don't you know me, sir? I'm Nicholas. And I know you are Washington Irving."
"To be sure, I am Nicholas. But how did you recognize me?"
"John Moon told me, sir, just how you look. John Moon knows Friedrich Knickerbocker's History of New York by heart. He told me that funny story of Olaf Van Cortlandt and the porpoises on the way down to Bowling Green to look for St. Nicholas where Olaf saw him."
Washington Irving chuckled with delight.
"So John Moon remembers Olaf, does he? Knows Knickerbocker by heart, does he? I have been asleep a long, long time, but I'm wide awake this Christmas Eve."
And stretching out both hands to the little Dutch boy who stood smiling up at him from the hearthrug, he called,
"Jump up, Nicholas, and I will tell you a marvelous tale of the goblins who guard the gold in the Catskill Mountains.
And as Nicholas sat listening to the story of the goblins, he could see the good St. Nicholas flying north over the Hudson beyond the Palisades to the Catskill Mountains. And the sides of the mountains opened as he passed, and out trooped an army of strange little men, laden with glittering gold, who marched down to the river and piled their gold on ships that waited there. And as the ships sailed away into the moonlight, Nicholas heard the distant call of a trumpet, and taking Washington Irving by the hand, he led him over to the window as St. Nicholas had told him. And as they stood there at the wide open window of the great palace, they heard men's voices singing and the tramp of marching feet.
"They are singing the great song of St. Nicholas,"
cried Washington Irving.
"Look, oh, look, Nicholas! The Knickerbockers are coming!"
And leaning far out of the palace window, Nicholas saw a great company of men marching two and two in the moonlight, led by a jolly fat trumpeter. They wore broad-brimmed black sugar-loaf hats on their heads, queer broad-skirted coats with big buttons, and wide breeches that reached to their knees. The silver buckles on their shoes flashed at every step they took, and great clouds of smoke rose from the long pipes they were smoking.
"There's Olaf the Dreamer,"
called Nicholas.
"I know it's Olaf marching on ahead."
"And there's Anthony Van Corlear, blowing his own trumpet,"
cried Washington Irving.
"and Hans Vanier Woodhout with his long spy-glasses, and that's old Walter the Doubter, the first who sits in the governor's chair, and William the Restless One, with the cocked hat on the back of his head, with his windmills. And here comes old Hard-Koppig Pete in his brimstone-colored breeches, carrying a fiddle tonight in place of his sword."
"St. Nicholas likes him best of all,"
said Nicholas.
"And so do I,"
exclaimed Washington Irving.
"Oh, Nicholas, what a Christmas celebration we will have when we open the doors for the Knickerbockers to come in."
"Quick, sir,"
exclaimed Nicholas.
"or the Knickerbockers may be gone."
"You are right, Nicholas. There isn't a second to lose."
And taking him by the hand, Washington Irving led Nicholas swiftly across the room and opened a door leading into a dimly lighted corridor guarded by great bronze gates. End of chapter 8.